Alright, for today's video I'm going to be working on the 66 coupe behind me. First starting with taking out the front and rear glass. So I'm just going to give you a little insight on what you need to be able to do that. It's actually a fairly easy thing to do. It's a lot easier than putting them in. But and you can do them by yourself. I've been asked, do you need extra help to get the windows out? But really you don't, as long as you're just careful with it. And I'll show you, and you'll see in the videos there of the process of what I'm doing. But just to give you an idea of it, this is all that you would need to take out front and rear glass. That is a window clip removal tool, which they're really tough to work with to find those molding clips. So a lot of times I'm using a screwdriver real carefully around just to pop them off. If your car is freshly painted, you definitely got to use this to remove the moldings. If you're just restoring your car and you're just taking everything apart and you don't mind what's going on, or if you nick something, you can use the screwdriver. And I got a removal tool. I'm going to pop off the windshield wiper arms, and then just a razor blade to cut the old weather strip off of the glass. So what I'm going to do first, you'll see I'll set up the GoPro and just time lapse all this, but I'm going to pop off the windshield wipers. I'm going to pry underneath of those, pop them off. Then I'll go around, take off all the moldings on the front, take off all the moldings on the back, and then I'll come back once I have that off and I'll show you what exactly I'm cutting with the razor blade to cut that old weather strip, and then the glass just pops out. So I'm going to set up the GoPro and get started there and get the glass out, and then I'll move on from there. We'll empty out some of the interior and see how much we can get done here this morning. Alright, so now I have all the front and back window moldings off. You can see I used a screwdriver, and I was going in between the body and that molding there, and just real gently just prying up on it a little bit, and then I'd be able to get my fingers underneath of it, and with your fingers pull up a little bit of tension. You don't want to bend the molding. If you're pulling off original moldings like this car, they're a lot stronger than the reproduction ones, so you can give them a little more effort than the new stuff. But I just pulled up, and if you pull up and you come down slowly with your screwdriver and move it away from the body, it'll wiggle that clip enough loose that your pressure will pop that molding out. And you can see I'm putting my screwdriver in there, and I'm being careful enough that I'm not even chipping this old paint that's on top of paint that's real lightly attached, because I see it chips off on other places around the car real easy. So if you're real gentle, you can do this screwdriver technique without messing up a painted car like this, where you really don't care about the paint. But if you're doing a car that's freshly painted and you got to pull the glass out for some reason, you got to use this window molding clip tool, which it's tough to use. It's tough to find those clips inside there because you can't see what you're doing. You just have to fish around until you get it. But that's what you would use in that case. But for me, in this car, it's nice. I can just breeze through it like this with a screwdriver. So now it's to the point where I'm just going to take out the glass, which it's only held in by the weather strip there. There is a sealer that goes around also, which whenever I do a video on reinstalling the glass, you'll see all that in that video. But for this one, you're just going to take a knife, and I have a fresh blade in there, which you may use one fresh one for the front and one for the back, just so it cuts nice. You're going to slide the knife up into that weather strip. You're going to jam it in between the glass and the weather strip so it cuts up through that weather strip completely. So I'm going in as far as that knife will actually go, and I'm just going to drag it along. And you got to be careful not to scratch your glass with the razor blade, so you got to put a little angle on it. But you're just dragging it along the whole way around the weather strip on the front and the back, and you'll see I'll just cut it right out of there. And then you'll just peel that layer of weather strip off. You'll see the edge of the glass then, and you'll see me in the video. I'll reach my arm up in the inside, push out on the glass, and what you'd want to do, because these windows have been in since the car was new, and I don't want to break the glass on either the front or back because I'm going to reuse it. I'm going to come on this side, push on the inside, and push the glass out a little bit to try and break that seal, and then I'll go on that side and wiggle that part loose just to make sure you're not putting too much pressure on one side that you crack the glass. So you want to evenly distribute your pressure to take it out. So that's what I'm going to do now. Cut that out, pop the glass out, and then we'll be back. All right, so the glass is out front and back. I just took a vacuum to it and cleaned up the loose stuff, but before you would ever put your windshield back in or your rear window back in, you would want to scrape that stuff off and clean it as best as you can before you would reseal that. So now, with the rest of the time I have here to work on this today, I'm going to just clean out the inside of it. Pull out the pieces that came with it. I didn't even really go through the box here. There's a couple new pieces in there, so I'll find out what I have. Pull out the back seat, the interior trim panels there on the side. I don't think I'll get to the dash there today, but I'm going to pull out the headliner, which you can see is part of the reason why you have to take out the glass to do your headliner, because it glues up onto the lip of the body here, front and back. So that's part of the reason why I pulled that out, because I do want to replace the headliner. Also, I wanted to reseal the windows just to make sure that there's no water that's going to be coming in once I'm done with it. So just going to set up the GoPro over there and start taking apart this interior. That's going to do it for today's progress, which I got farther than I originally planned, but everything comes apart so easily. Half the screws weren't in, so I just tore apart as much as I could, especially in the dash. Got stuff out like the dash pad that's just going to get thrown away. But I am going to reuse a bunch of these parts just to save money on that end. You can see they mangled the radio area, which I'd like to mount a CD player in the dash just because I'm going to drive it and I have a ton of CDs. But that's just one thing. It looks like the wiring in the car is actually in really nice shape. Someone recently put in that radio. It's not that old. So the car was tinkered with to try and get it up to driving. I don't know the word. That someone was trying to make it a driver themselves, it seems like, so they were working on it, but like the gauge cluster wasn't hooked up, other than I think 2 little lights were hanging in there yet, so it all just popped right out. Even the screws, because it's not that rusty on the top end of this car, but the screws for those roof rail channels came right out, which is always nice, so you don't have to cut them out or really drill them or anything like that. So also a little tip: when you're pulling out your headliner bows, you see I kept them in sequence of how they were in the car. I put tape around them and I'll mark them which one's which. I always start with the front being number 1. I'll label it 1F, meaning front, 2, 3, 4 rear, so 4R I mark it, just so that you know the way that it came out, so there's no confusion when you're putting it back together. But yeah, everything's pretty much gutted as far as I'm going to do it interior. Until I do the sheet metal. I'm going to pull out the gas tank in another episode. The next episode will probably be taking out the gas tank, drive line, and I may pull off the fenders to make things easier, because I'm planning on putting torque boxes in it to strengthen up the car, because these 65, 66s didn't have torque boxes in them from the factory unless it was a convertible, and it actually adds a lot of strength. And I would like to change these fender extensions that go to the cowl, because they're rusted out pretty bad, and that's one of the main tie together areas. This side's actually worse. You can see how it's rotted out on the cowl there. So I'm going to patch that hole up. So I'm going to take off the fenders, patch the hole in the cowl here, and then change these top pieces out, the apron extensions, just to strengthen everything up again. Do torque boxes, floor pans, because you can see they're pretty rusty, and I am just going to do halves, I believe. Even though a one-piece floor is quicker, it costs more out of pocket to do it that way. I think a one-piece floor is around $500 or so, and individual pieces I think are around $90, and that'll give you an idea of how I weld in that seam wherever I'm changing it. You could just see how everything, you know, lays here. As far as the dampness, you can see the nice clean line from the paint on that tunnel. That's where I change it. I go up above where that rust is and cut it out, but I'll get into that in the video where I do the floor pans. Toe boards, someone put patch panels on top, so I'm going to do the toe boards on both sides. But that's going to be pretty much it for rust repair: the floors, torque boxes, and some of the structural work that I mentioned on top of the aprons. But everything else isn't too bad. Everything closes, latches, the windows go up and down. I have all the windows down, which I'll go over in another video doing sheet metal. But you want to protect all your glass from any kind of sparks that you're making. So whenever I'm doing my weld work, I'll put covers over top of the vent windows there, and some of this to protect the glass that's showing, because as soon as you hit sparks into that glass, it sticks in that glass and it'll never come out. So that's just one thing you want to look for. But I'm just gonna work the next little bit, putting all my parts on the shelf, going through the box of what extra stuff I have. But hopefully that was enjoyable to watch and helpful for some of you that may be doing similar things here. As far as taking out your glass or some of your interior, you can follow along there and see how that was done. Like I said, the next video will be ripping out the drive line, fenders, gas tank, and then eventually once I get it in my sheet metal room, I'll take it up in the air, take off all the suspension, because all the suspension is going to get changed. I'm going to undercoat the car completely on the bottom side just to give it some protection for driving. And yeah, the videos will continue from there. Thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone that's been watching. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video.